Welcome back to Colorado Fire College Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Gay.
I'm firefighter EMT Eric Scholl.
And today we've got a special host with us. We've got Eric Abramson with us. He's a wildland guy, and he's got a ton of knowledge he's going to share with us today.
Howdy.
So, Eric, tell me how you got started in the fire service.
Well, it starts with my grandpa. He went down to the recruiting office during World War II, so early 40s with his buddies, and his buddies went to war, and he got rejected because he had flat feet. Orthopedics and things like that didn't exist back then. Mm-hmm. But what he was encouraged to do was to go join the Newark Fire Department, where he was, Newark, New Jersey, just outside of New York City. And at that time, there were a lot of needs for what they called the Civil Defense Corps, which was, ask your grandparents. It was the shut off your lights, the bombers are coming, fallout shelters, things like that. And so it was a part outreach, but also like they would hit the streets, and each one had a neighborhood that they would organize. So he was part of the fire department. When the war ended, he stayed with the department as a volunteer. And I believe he was a lieutenant at a certain point. Eventually, he retired to Florida. And he was in an area way outside of Palm Beach that was just developing, but they had a firehouse. And he knew I didn't like golf as like an 8 or 9-year-old. And he would drop me at the firehouse with the guys. And so I would hang in the Bat Chief's truck and watch him take care of patients and car accidents and stuff. And eventually they let me clean the trucks, and I got into it. And from there, a couple of years away from it, I was working for the Appalachian Mountain Club, which was this hut system in New Hampshire. And we have the oldest backcountry rescue program in the country. And it started in like the late 1800s. Oh, wow. So people were going to rescue people off Mount Washington in that time. And so we had this storied thing, and I was up there for training for that in December during winter break from school. And we had a double femur up on Huntington's Ravine, and I went with the guys. And I was right in there. I wasn't really afraid of any of that. I didn't really have a lot of training at that point, but the crew pulled me into the rescue program. And so that's really where my rescue career started. Went to college, got away from it for a couple years again, and I really remember the Black Tiger fire in Boulder Canyon that burned up Sugarloaf, because my house in Boulder was on the flight path. And I remember those old aircraft, and my dad was Air Force. And I just really, for some reason, really remember that memory. And then I moved up to Nederland, and we had a really wet spring, my first spring, and my little crawl-through basement was flooding, and 2 guys showed up in a brush truck and pumped out my basement. And I invited them in because it was that cold, rainy spring day like it was a couple days ago up here. And anyway, they saw my backcountry rescue stuff on the wall. There was this bandana and my climbing gear, and they asked me, oh, you do backcountry stuff? And I said, I used to. Come down to the fire department. And that was almost 30 years ago at Nederland.
Wow.
And so we've gone through a lot of changes since then.
Yeah.
But that's kind of the short path. There's another chapter in there that we can get back to that starts with how I became a federal firefighter. Another chapter of that. But I was pretty, I did about 5-6 years before that happened at Nederland. And I was working in the film business. I was a camera assistant and starting to operate a little bit, and I was directing a little bit, and I'd done some TV, and I was having pretty good success, and I'd go in and out of Los Angeles a lot. I'd go there and work for a month and come home. And eventually I said, I got to move out there and try it. So I took a leave from the department, and I went out to L.A., and I checked into the fire scene. All the L.A. County was all paid professional. I wasn't really going to do that. But I lived near the lifeguard training center, so I got to know a couple of those guys when I was there. But anyway, things got really weird in L.A. with this big movie deal, and I needed a break. So I came back to Colorado.
Now you've been with Nederland for almost 30 years. Has it always been structural, or are you doing wildland?
We're an all-hazard department from the get-go. We're much better trained in many of these disciplines now than when I started. But the intent was we would do anything that was required in the community.
Okay.
Definitely had that spirit. So, yeah, I was in Los Angeles, came back to Colorado for a break, and that was the year of the Hayman Fire, 2002. And my friends at the Forest Service called me and said, hey, man, they need help at the tanker base. You like aviation. You want to go work. So I was an AD. Went down there. I didn't know anything about this. I knew about the aircraft, and I knew they filled them with retardant. But, a week after being down there, I'm filling aircraft on the largest fire in Colorado history. I mean, we are going gangbusters all day. As fast as we can land planes, fill them, and get them turned around, that's what we're doing. It's pretty exciting. My Air Force dad understood what I was doing because, parents never understand the jobs that people do, even especially in the fire service, you know. And anyway, I was sitting with one of the pilots, Rick Schwartz, one night, and I said, man, that PB-4Y, which is a modified B-52, this is a 1948 airframe, and we're in 2002 sitting on that sofa. I said, does that thing ever concern you? It's kind of old. And we'd lost a C-130 in the spring, a couple months before, out in California. So it was on my mind. And he looked me right in the eye and he said, Eric, we've had to limp her home a couple times. It's been a little, like if I told you the story, you'd be scared. But me and Milt, talking about his co-pilot, have saved thousands of homes. And we've saved a bunch of towns. Mm-hmm. And I would rather die in that aircraft than wish I'd done something with my life. And when he said that to me on the sofa, my whole, goals of being in Hollywood kind of were, not meaningless, but just didn't matter. Mm-hmm. I saw this guy sitting in front of me that was a fucking, excuse my language. I saw a guy sitting in front of me that was a cowboy, and he wasn't afraid to take risk. And he was living an adventurous life, and he was getting it done. And it really made an impact on me. 3 days later, about 7 runs into the fire, we had transitioned them to a fire start up in Estes Park. And they lost a wing on their last approach, and they augured in right over my hand crew that I worked with. Garth Wagner and that whole crew up on Ridge Road were right below it when it happened. And I heard the whole thing go down on the radio, and it really changed the direction of my life. I didn't go back to Hollywood. Yeah, I joined the Feds the next year as a seasonal, and I did 4 seasons with them. Learned initial attack, learned how to cut. Was on a hand crew. They'd send me with the Type 2 hand crew. It was a great experience. Got my squad boss then. Started working on my engine boss my last year. Eventually completed that a few years later and found myself on probably most of the bigger fires in Boulder County in the last 20 years. And again, I'll always say this. Just because I've been around a while, I'm no expert. I've definitely learned from some really great people, and I hope that what I've learned I get to pass on. So that's kind of the short history on how I got to where I'm sitting now. There's more to it, obviously, but it depends where you guys want to take the conversation.
Well, I think the next thing I want to ask you about is, how you ended up specializing in the PIO side of the wildland.
Oh, yeah. Well, the PIO thing came by accident. Again, I was pretty content being on the volunteer department. I was going out with engines a little bit, especially when I was getting my engine boss done, like the State Forest Service would call, and I'd kind of plug in with them, just do a 1 week or a 2 week thing. Real informal. And so I knew that existed, and then I started taking what happened is a couple of the neighboring departments from Netherlands built dispatch engines, but they didn't have enough engine bosses. Hello. So I took Timberline's engine out a couple times. You and I went out on Timberline's engine.
The Ryan fire.
Yep, that's right, Ryan. And I took 4 miles out, and what it did was it got me out, made some extra money, which was good as an artist because being a filmmaker in a non-major market is tricky. But, it's worked out okay. But anyway, that started to happen, and so I was starting to get out a lot. And I was, where was it? I was at an event in Boulder, and it was an anniversary of one of the fires. And one of my mentors, Greg Toll, who's no longer with us from Boulder County, he kind of overheard this conversation I was having with a couple that had lost their home. And he pulled me aside after and he said, hey, man, you were really good about communicating what was going on. And I was just really impressed by that. Have you ever considered being a PIO? And I looked at him, what's a PIO? When I was doing initial attack with the Feds, man, we closed the gate. We didn't talk to anybody. Mm-hmm. There was no press out there. It was always initial attack. Hopefully it was a small fire. If it got away from us, maybe the press would show up, but it wasn't my job. I didn't know anything about it. Mm-hmm. So I looked into it and I was like, oh, I get to combine my media skills with my operational experience. And I'm pretty good at explaining stuff. And I've always been someone who can take someone's complex idea and kind of boil it down so someone that doesn't have that training, it's more digestible. I kind of have developed that skill for whatever reason. And so I took the class in Colorado Springs, and I will never forget, and I'll leave the teacher's name out of it, but there were 2 guys in that room with dirty boots on, me and another guy. We were clearly from operations. And she came up to that table the first day, and she was really nice about it. But she said, look, you guys, you come from ops, but you're not going to be in the field. You're probably not going to fly. It's going to be a different job now. Okay. I didn't know any better. Well, next year I start my training. My first assignment is up to Alaska. I get a flight around the fire the first day. The next day I talked with the ops guy at lunch, and I said, hey, man, I'd really like to see tundra firefighting, because my crew boss on that Type 2 team I used to go out with when I was a Fed was an Alaska Midnight Sun hotshot, and he used to plug us in with the hotshot crews. We'd super crew, we called it, which was basically me and 6 AmeriCorps kids trying to keep up with a hotshot crew. It was great for cutting and anything. Anyway, Russ looks at me and goes, okay, well, I said, I know that's a big ask, man. I just want to see what they do out there. Next morning at breakfast, he comes up to me and goes, can you be ready to leave in 45 minutes? I'm like, leave where? He's like, you're going overnight. And I stayed out overnight on the Tundra. It was one of the shot crews.
Oh, shit.
And so not every fire, but because of my relationship and experience with aircraft and my history, I've been managing to fly it and get on the line almost all the time, because there's not many of us in the PIO shop that come from operations.
Right.
And if they did, they've been out of it for a long time. So I feel like I'm in this really great spot. We're the minority in the information shop, are operational PIOs. And in fact, one guy I work for, Micah, he came from the military. And in his role, he sees me more as an intelligence person, which is the collecting of the imagery, the data. And so that's kind of where I've sat with the PIO thing. It's been really cool, and I feel like I'm serving the public maybe sometimes better than the really well-trained PIO comes from public affairs. Like, they know how to get the bullet points and deal with all the different software, which I'm okay at. But we need all those people in the team. Mm-hmm. But I'm coming from, you want to know about backburning? Again, I'm not an expert, but I've held a torch in my hand in multiple states. Mm-hmm. I've been involved in loading up aircraft and getting people out of aircraft. So I can speak to it from a place of truth. And so that's my mission as a PIO, is to make sure that we're giving people the real story, Like, we tend to sugarcoat stuff sometimes, and I think, especially when you have an out-of-state team comes to a place like Northern California where the community really understands fire. Most of them have family in fire in some way. So you have to be more straightforward with people like that. They can smell when you're not being honest. Yeah. So, long answer, but that's the PIO thing. And I got a nickname a couple years ago in Idaho. I was right on top of lead Sawyer, not on top of him, but I watched a lead Sawyer get really hurt, and we started an IWI, and the Soup was the next guy there for the crew. We all worked together really well and got this guy to the hospital, and he's doing fine. He's back on the crew, actually. But pretty serious groin injury, slip with a saw, it was bad.
Ouch.
But those guys asked me to come out to camp, and I thought I was in trouble or something, like, why these guys want to talk to me? I tend to be a little hands-off with the shot crews. Not so much anymore, but they nicknamed me the Dirty Boots PIO.
I like it.
Yeah, so I gotta get on it and make a logo or something, make a sticker. But
absolutely.
I appreciate that ethos, and there are others like me. We have a couple in Boulder County that come from a bunch of years of operations.
Is there anything that you missed out in operations that you wouldn't want to go back and do, like dozer crew? Or?
Oh, man, if I could go back? Well, we'll see. I'm going back to, I almost got my helicopter crew member done, and then I walked away because a friend of mine died in a civilian air crash. I needed a break after the original experience, too. But, I'm a little on the older side to be on Helitac, but I probably would have loved to have been on, like, a rappel ship.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. But no, I still have a few more operational years left. I just spanked the pack test a couple days ago, and then the next day it spanked me. Of course, I was pretty sore.
Yeah.
But no, I got a few more years to do. I'm like I said, because of where I come from as far as operations and the way a lot of the teams I work with in information, man, I'm out on my own. I determine what I'm doing. I'm at ops meetings all the time. I know exactly what's going on the fire for real. I'm not waiting for all the delays through all the different things that have to happen. Like, I'm sitting in the planning room at 6 a.m. Mm-hmm. I know what the intent is on every division, and I can kind of pick and choose. And once the teams start to trust me, especially the divs, they know that I'm not going to get in the way, even in a place where they might turn a regular PIO away. They also know if I'm bringing press with me that we're really going to make sure we get a good story and keep them safe. And so it's not something that divs have to worry about. Like, that's one of the goals. Like, sometimes visitors to divisions that aren't used to working in those divisions can be a problem. It's another factor, right? Another thing to manage. And so being good about communicating when I'm in and out of the divisions and learning how to be respectful when a guy tells me, you know what, this isn't the time, I don't argue. I trust him that he's being honest with me because we've talked about it already. He knows what I was going to do. It isn't national ABC coming in there. It's some podcaster that's a local guy.
Yeah.
Like we can divert them to a different story for now.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's kind of what's going on with the information shop. It's an important job, and I tell firefighters, if you have some operational experience and you like media and you can communicate well with the public and you're not afraid to talk about fire with folks, it's a great position, especially later on.
Yeah. It's a super unique thing, definitely. Like that's been getting a lot of departments more well known, and just everything about them is, public education and stuff like that. Like people are learning more about it. Like it's something that's really starting to take off, I've noticed.
Yeah, we're recording this in May, and May is Wildfire Awareness Month, and so part of our messaging with the department is every week we're sending out a new source of information for them to mitigate and home harden their property. It's an important part of the branding, and bigger departments really. I mean, I know a couple of the guys that work in the basically the LA unit of Cal Fire.
Yeah.
And they have a multi-million-dollar media budget in that office.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah.
And it's incredible, the videos that they make and the branding. And so we're getting there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
In our county, in Boulder County, the sheriff's department really heads up the public information for big incidents. So I if they need help, I'll come in. But chances are in the county, I'm going to be on an engine.
Right.
So now this kind of touches aviation, PIO, kind of all the topics. But how do you think technology is innovating all of it? I mean, besides just the creation of social media for people to go faster, now we've got thermal imaging, infrared imagery, MMA aircrafts.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's a lot going on.
Even the automated Black Hawk now?
Yeah, we just flew another Black Hawk. It was done last year, too, on the Army side. But, yeah, the private company demonstrated their system, and that system is really not just for a Black Hawk. It can be plugged into a couple different... Yeah, there's a lot of excitement. There's a lot of uncertainty too, right? What do firefighters hate the most? The way things are and change.
Yep.
But the intel side of it, again, kind of circling back on that concept, which is part of this, is it's really effective. And I first saw it, it was that first year of training as a PIO. I went out to California for the first time. I believe it was the August complex. Anyway, I worked for Team 5, California, one of the Type 1 teams now. They're a complex team. Great team. The lead PIO, Mark Savage, was probably one of my best teachers. He was 30 years on LA County Fire. He was also the lead PIO for the last 15 of that. So he's a master. Like, the guy just had so much wisdom that you would never learn in class. But I was attached to the California Guard for about 3 days on that assignment. And I pretty much buddied up with their PAO, Public Affairs Officer, I think is what they call them. They have some other fancy S392 or something, I'm not very good at all that stuff. Anyway, the public affairs person I was tied to. And so we did some stories on the hand crew. I interviewed General Smiley, who's their lead guy for all of California, about their intent to be in fire. And then they showed me some stuff. Some of it we didn't really go big public with, but we had access to a live satellite. So basically spy technology or targeting
Yeah.
And I was able to take a look at, you could see firefighters on the ground. Mm-hmm. They also had technology that allowed them to be identified with heart rate, body temperature. So they're using this stuff in combat situations to track their squads, and they're starting to use that for us. But the satellite imagery is really great. Weather's not a problem. You're not putting people in the air. Mm-hmm. The MMA you mentioned is an excellent platform. For those that don't know, that's the multi-mission aircraft out of Colorado. There's 2 of them. I think they're both on Pleiades now. Pilates, I don't know the brand, but single turboprop, very fast, very high. And they can map fire. But you got 3 or 4 people in there, so that's a risk. The satellites are able to get it in real time. There's ground sensors now, which is sad because we're losing some of the tradition of lookout tower people.
Right.
But we're also getting a pretty accurate system, And so it's all evolving, too. It's all new. You mentioned the remote control Black Hawk. Mm-hmm. I see a day when we're running, I don't think it's very far away, where we're running cargo with automated. Mm-hmm. Now, is a fire crew going to get into a helicopter without a pilot? Not for me.
No.
Mm-hmm. But I'll send you cargo up to a spike camp. Hell yeah.
Yeah.
So I've always embraced technology. In my other career, I was a film assistant. I worked on film cameras, and I watched video come in, and I watched my peers that didn't adopt stop working.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a part of you that has to accept it. But I also, like this year, I'm not a huge fan of Elon Musk, but I was issued a Starlink antenna this summer, and it was a game changer, both for my job as an information officer. I didn't have to go to camp. I could sit on the side of the mountain, eat my lunch, edit a video, edit some pictures, write some stuff up, send it into the office from where I was. It also allowed me to provide that service to some of the firefighters.
Which is amazing.
Unbelievable. Like the morale booster with some of the teams, even the private engines, they don't have a Starlink on their truck.
It used to be coffee. Now it's internet service.
Yeah. I mean, I showed up and the guy's like, hey, I heard you have a Starlink on your truck. Can I use it? I'm like, of course. He's like, oh man, I'm missing my boy's graduating from school or something. And I'm like, dude, I'll just leave it on. Just hit the switch when you're done. And I saw him later. He's like, oh, dude, I used it for like a half hour. I'm like, don't worry about it. But they were so stoked to have that access. Mm-hmm. So those type of technologies are pretty exciting, and just the connectivity, right? I mean, even on the Marshall Fire, the radio system got so crazy. We were texting between us. So you'd need to adapt. I mean, mapping is another thing. I carry several GPS and search. When we have a backcountry rescue at Netherland Fire Protection District, I get an email from the head of RMR that has last known location, staging on the map.
Yeah.
Pretty cool stuff. I mean, there's so much of it too, but the mapping, I think it's the mapping, imaging, that stuff's really beneficial, and it's kind of already here.
Mm-hmm.
We'll see where the automated stuff goes. I mean, just using drones for IR, like you mentioned at night, that again is mapping. We were on that Pine Gulch fire a couple years ago, and we did nights, and we were using 2 ignition drones. And the way that fire was, we were protecting this very valuable valley, a lot of ranches, a lot of homes, some really like hunting lodges, which are an economic driver for the area. So there's a lot at stake in this valley. And if you went up that one side of the valley, it went really steep, and then there was this big shelf, and then it went steep again, and the fire was coming over that top ridge. So normally you'd put a bunch of people up there. Well, no, we just ran the hotshot crews and the 2 ignition drones from 3 miles apart on either end of the valley, kept all the crew, the hand crew, the hotshots on that first pitch. So that's only a couple, it wasn't getting them way out of sight. And we let the drones do the work, like 20,000 acres one night.
That's incredible.
Incredible fire behavior. Like they could not burn during the day, and the drones allowed us to do that. So yeah, really cool. I'm excited where it's going to go. I don't know how much of it I'll get to see,
Well, with the technology, it's often, driven by funding, and I feel like funding has recently been cut.
Yeah, there's a lot of uncertainty, isn't there?
There is.
Yeah, I don't know. The way I put it to people is, on the surface, they're not touching the fire crew. Like our fire crew up at Ridge Road, which is a Arapahoe Roosevelt National Forest workstation, is fully staffed. But the support behind them isn't. Mm-hmm. And so I had to put this to my father, who was a load master in the Air Force, meaning he loaded cargo planes and unloaded cargo planes. Important job. I said, Dad, is the Air Force 30 fighter jet pilots? Oh, no. There's mechanics. Mm-hmm. There's people that manage the flight deck. There's the radar operators. It goes on. Who's feeding everybody, right? And so if you're going to compromise, if you're going to say you're not affecting fire, but you're cutting everything behind it, that becomes rather difficult. It's the same in the military. The military isn't a platoon of Marines. I've heard upwards of 8 to 1 sometimes in combat versus support. And so it's a little uncertain what's happening. Now, can we make some real efficiency cuts in our government? Absolutely. Mm-hmm. We see some stupid stuff, right? Definitely. Like I've seen some, saving, spending $1 to save a nickel. Mm-hmm. So I'm not against, and that's the thing we all have to get to too, is like everyone's so polarized. Like me saying that DOGE is not doing an effective job doesn't mean I support government waste. Just the opposite. Mm-hmm. Let's make it real. And so there are some efforts. I know that the senator from Montana, Sheehy, who comes from aviation and is a red-carded guy. I mean, I don't agree with everything about him politically, and that's fine. But he's pushing for firefighter pay, which he got. And the other thing he's kind of part of is this idea that we're going to bring all of our national wildland force together under one roof. Can it be done?
It sounds like a logistical nightmare.
It totally.
Yeah.
Logistical, financial, cultural.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right? Like there's a big difference between how the BLM sees their lands and how the Forest Service manages theirs. But I do see this idea of a national unified firefighting force. And so maybe these, the BLM, U.S. Forest Service, they hold their management of their lands, but the fire service comes under one thing. I can see that. And I know Canada tried to do it, and a couple of the provinces just couldn't get along on it.
Mm-hmm.
Will they pull it off? I kind of doubt it. I'd like to think about it, though. I think it's cool. Like, it's a cool idea, and that makes it easier to function internationally.
Mm-hmm.
If you have one, to work out getting people to Canada was really complicated, apparently. I wasn't part of it, but, I worked with a Saskatchewan team last year for about a week. I hung with them, which is a great experience because they have a totally different, they don't wear shelters. They're in Saskatchewan, which is lakes everywhere, so it's a water pumping hose show. Like, it was wild. We had them, they set up a bunch of hose to just get after some stuff, and watching them move hose and pumps, like, you could tell, like, damn, these guys know how to do this. And then one day they were like, well, we want to learn how to cut line. And we're like, what do you mean learn? And they'd never really cut line.
Never needed to.
Yeah.
No. They might chunk out a little bit around a fire, but they're using water.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so a couple of us spent some time teaching them tool order and how to use tools and how to work together closely. And 3 days later, the div says, man, come here, look at this. And he's like, look at this line they built. Like, perfect.
Wow.
So, yeah, big props to the Saskatchewan crew up there. They were fun to hang with, too, but it was weird. Like, I'd walk up on them, and all their packs are sitting by their truck. And they're working active fire. It's not part of their deal. And Spain is like that. Australia is also like that. They don't carry shelters.
That just scares me.
Yeah, I don't know. I had a conversation with two Spanish smoke jumpers. They came to Netherlands and with their wives. They were on vacation. I happened to be working at this little bookstore, my friend's bookstore, to stay busy. And they asked me, because of that shelter, do you take more chances? I said no. And they're like, well, then why do you carry it? Which is a really good point. Like, if you've gotten to the point where you have to deploy, you made a lot of, and we've looked at all these tragedy fires. There's always a couple really big mistakes. I mean, you don't want to couch. It's always like the fire service is famous for that. Oh, look at those guys do that. They didn't pull that right, or what? There's always bitching, right? There's that old joke in the music business. How many drummers does it take to play a solo? Well, it's 7. 1 to play it and 6 to say they could have done it better.
Yep. Yeah.
Right. So, and so but yeah, anyway, that's sort of it's interesting to watch that, there's a lot of judgment, but I can see a day when we don't carry those. I'd prefer to have the extra 10 pounds, frankly.
Yeah.
I mean, look at Storm King. The studies there all said that probably a bunch of those folks that didn't make it over that ridge would have if they'd had less weight. Mm-hmm. Woulda, shoulda, coulda, woulda, right?
A lot to think about.
Yeah, totally. But it's an exciting time too. It's uncertain. Like, who knows what the AD programs are all messed up. So we're going to be pretty shorthanded. I mean, the Hotshot Wake Up guy, he said that we have right now, there's only 19 complex teams, and they're usually, I think, about 30 that can field. So it's going to be messy.
Yeah, that's going to be a huge learning gap because missing a third of the workforce is just, you're going to feel it.
Yeah, it's going to affect us in different ways. And a lot of it, I think, is going to end up, just like the military, there's going to be a lot of privatization, which is part of this, Underfund, privatize is an old trick. And I'm not opposed to some privatization. We've seen it with, catering has gotten better. At least, Cal Fire's always had their own, and it's always great. Like, those guys know how to do a couple things really well. Messaging we talked about, but aviation and the food. Mm-hmm. They know how to feed people. So, yeah, we'll see how it all evolves. We have our evolving state. DFPC is here, and they're handling our tracking of our training, and they're building their aviation out with the UH-60s, the Firehawks that they've built. So yeah, it's always changing, and I think you have to embrace it. Mm-hmm. It's probably the biggest problem in the firehouse, and that's true for structure too. people don't embrace new things, and then they either get left behind or
Yeah.
we all have
there's-
examples of that.
There's all kinds of different variations of things that can go wrong when trying to change things or not change things.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting.
Well, I got one last question for you.
Okay.
Out of all the adventures you've been on, what's the coolest place you've been to?
Oh, damn. In fire.
Mm-hmm.
The coolest place. I'd probably say the coolest place I've been, and I the name of this place has escaped me, but it was on that Wyoming fire. They sent us up to take care of this hunting lodge, and the hunting lodge cost $30,000 a week,
Whoa.
and you're guaranteed a champion elk or something. This is the highest end ranch outside of Cody, and it was an incredible piece of property. I would say overall I've seen some beautiful private property, but I also think about, like, I've been honored to see a lot of destruction too, and I think about that. It's not cool, but a lot of impact. Like I remember watching, going to the campfire. I was there the first day, and we're patrolling a mile and a half. You don't see a house survive. I feel honored to be present to try to help people in those situations too. So that, it's cool isn't the right word there, but you know what I mean? Like, it sort of equals out.
Definitely a unique opportunity.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of beautiful national forest areas, and like get included into like community hot springs along the Salmon River in Idaho because the neighborhood's thankful that we're there. Getting to soak after hours, and like, yeah, there's a lot. There's too many to list. Like, what's your favorite song?
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. But yeah, we haven't really talked about structure much, and I don't want to come off as just a wildland guy.
Well, then let's get to structure side of things.
Yeah, I don't know what the time frame is.
No,
for
we're
this
good.
thing.
We got
Yeah.
plenty of time.
Yeah. So I mentioned my grandfather, and that kind of got me started. When I was in high school, we had an old fire truck at the high school, and we didn't really do much with it, except there was the one weekend we had a hurricane, and so we used it to pump out some of the dorms, which was kind of cool. But then we broke the axle on it. It was classic, classic early volunteerism with not much guidance. But yeah, no, I'm proud to serve Netherland Fire. I definitely am starting to go towards engineering. I'm proud to say, as an older dude now, I went back and got my structure certs back in February and March, and it was really hard. I can still do things as good as some of the 20-year-olds. There are some things I cannot do like a 20-year-old anymore. But especially searching I used to be really fast. Now, not so much.
Yeah, knees just don't have it in them.
Yeah.
do they?
No, they don't. But it was good to go back and prove myself. The reason I lost those certs was kind of a political upheaval at my department, which is not a unique story in small departments all over the country. But it was part of what happened, and I focused on wildland, which was good for me because I like being in the woods based on my backcountry experience, from the AMC. And but I always respect it. I love it. I'm working towards engineering more and more now, so I'll run the truck, and I'm not quite sitting up top with a cigar in my mouth like New York Fire, but and that's the other sort of side thing that's interesting about going out on these big fires with these IMTs is that I often am working side by side with very experienced structure people, especially New York has, since 9/11, a lot of us, not me, but a lot of people came to help from all over the country. And New York Fire, they all talk about that they were so humbled that people came from everywhere to manage this horrible scene so they could be at home with their families after losing, a quarter of their workforce. Maybe not a quarter, but a substantial loss. Lots of stations lost people, lost all entire shifts, so a lot of knowledge and experience. Anyway, they promised themselves, New York Fire did, that they were going to start an incident management team to learn how to do that so they could come out and help. And so every year for the last 6 or 7, I'm working with New York Fire IMT guys. And they're learning the PIO job. They're learning finance, or they know finance, or they're just getting into operational positions now in wildfire, but all these support positions they do at home. But I'm working side by side with a guy who's, he's been a ladder engineer for 10 years in New York. He's a captain on a station, a busy station that's running more calls in a night than I run in a month. So it's been kind of cool to compare notes and see them come into our culture too. I brought this one Lieutenant Orr up to the fire, and I introduced him to Danny, who's the soup for Tahoe Hot Shots. And or had never been to the line. He'd been on 3 fires. They hadn't taken him out of IMT, and I got him out of there with me, and we spent the evening and night with this crew doing night burns and stuff. And him and Danny must have talked for an hour, just about like the total differences in cultures. And Orr came to me afterwards, and I said, "So what do you think of all that?" And he got to shoot a very pistol, and we're in the UTV. It's nighttime. There's all these crews out. He'd never seen anything like that.
Yeah.
But he said, "Man, these wildland guys, these hotshots are just like us. They're top of the game, and they love what they do." So there is a universal thing about all of us. It comes from different places, I'm noticing, and different motivations for people, but we are all brothers. I've gotten to travel the world a bit with my cameras in my film career, and I make a habit of stopping at firehouses. And like I spent some decent time at the Malmo main station, which is the old part of the station is 700 years old. It was horse-drawn carriages.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Now it has some of the most modern technology. That was 10 years ago. Like they had tablets in the vehicles then. The cars project their design information. Like you get your Homatro guide from the proximity sensor in the car.
Wow.
So you pull up on a Volvo and a Saab in an intersection in Malmo, it tells you what the car models are, where to cut.
Wow.
They had that a long time ago. So the technology in the houses there is pretty cool. And then I spent time in the Osaka main station too, which was really a trip because nobody really spoke any English. But I spent a couple hours there seeing their stuff, how it works. I showed them some stuff that I do. Like it was cool.
Yeah.
So you start to realize it's an international brother and sisterhood.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So on the structure side, do you have a specialty you want to get into?
Well, I'm starting to go towards engineering because I'm old now, man. 60's coming up in a couple of years, pretty fast, faster than I'd like.
So you want to do UPU?
Yeah, I think that's what I'm going to do. I got my utility DO, so I'm going to go for pumper next.
Okay.
It'll be hard. I'm pretty dyslexic. I don't take tests very well.
Yeah.
Show me how to do something, I can do it forever. But taking tests on a tablet is a nightmare for me. It's very difficult. But I'm up for the challenge. But I still, and maybe this is from Academy too, I still know how to make access into a house. I like breaking stuff. But I'm also good at getting in without doing that. Like we had a house an empty house next to a neighbor that's the smoke detectors have been going off. And so there's nobody in it. We got to get these off because it's like 4 a.m. She calls us. And, I always could tell there's sort of a funny thing about fire. You look at firefighters who know how to break into cars and get into houses really easy, and you wonder what kind of childhood they had.
You already know.
But we made entry without breaking the place and got it done, But it was, I kind of I definitely like forcible entry still. As long as I can swing a Halligan, get out of my way, man, let's go. Mm-hmm. That's one of my favorite things to make entry quickly and effectively and still control the fire flow is really important. Mm-hmm. So, yeah. But aviation's where my heart is, and I look forward to seeing where that goes now because eventually I'll get to what will be like a ship manager, so I'll manage one ship on a fire just to change it up. Mm-hmm. Being a PIO is fun, but after a while, like I did almost 90 days this year, I would have rather have taken a different assignment in the middle just for a break.
Mm-hmm.
So you prefer the ships, or do you ever want to get into the seats and the VLATs?
Well, my thing with fixed wing is I like being on the receiving end of fixed wings. But no, I don't. It doesn't. I'm into helicopters. Okay. I always have been. Me and my buddy Will went down to get to the recruitment office, and they looked at me with eyeglasses, and that was late '80s, no mid '80s, and they said, "No, we got other jobs for you." I'm like, not interested. But Will went on to have quite a career there. But I like helicopters. They're a lot more capable. It's also we're in this bridge like we talked about, right? We're starting to get into unmanned stuff, and it's all kind of together on that side. Where unmanned fixed wing of that size, I don't see that coming for a while.
That has a whole bunch of more challenges.
Yeah, but there are some smaller UAS platforms now that are fixed wing. Like there's one that I saw last summer. They didn't get to fly because the conditions were too windy up in Wyoming. Vertical takeoff, but then it's a horizontal, but it can stay up for 10 hours. It's a targeting drone that's been adapted. I mean, you should have seen the 4 guys that got out of the trailer when I showed up. Like you could tell they were all ex-Army, that's what they do. And it's good. Like we might as well use this hardware and this expensive stuff we've developed for something other than violence, like these guys were pretty stoked on this platform.
What about using night vision on night ops in aviations?
Yeah, it's key to it. I mean, it's riskier. You know, but I mean, I guess the thing that I've come to learn is when I started working with helicopters, and that actually started at the Appalachian Mountain Club because we used to run cargo to stock the huts, and I got in with that crew. And I learned stuff that takes you an entire class and a task book to do in like one afternoon, like doing cargo, you know, doing weight calcs and all that stuff. It was kind of fast and loose because this guy was a Vietnam era pilot. All those guys that came out of Vietnam flying helicopters were free thinkers, and they had a certain skill set, and they were cowboys, and that skill set was very good for wildland fire. What's happened now, though, is that the crews have different skill sets. Guys that fly Blackhawks in Afghanistan have command and control above them. There's somebody supervising what's happening. Their engagement rules, all that stuff goes through this upper level, which is probably good, but they come out with a different set of skills. And one of the things they come out with, though, is a lot of hours with night vision.
Yeah.
So it's a new generation of skills. And California is using it. We used it last summer in Cali on the Burrell fire. There was 2 Blackhawks working the fire all night. Or, sorry, 1 Hook and 1 Blackhawk. These guys came with thousands of hours of IR flying. We did have that crash, you know, was that 2 years ago up in Estes.
Yeah.
And it was unfortunate. It's a lesson in information, too, which, you know, if you're ever going to talk about something you're about to do, wait till it's over and then tell everyone about it.
Yeah.
And that was really unfortunate because there was a bit of corporate pressure, in my opinion, to be the first to do a fixed wing drop. And for those that don't know, this was going to be the first nighttime IR fixed wing flight with a seat, and unfortunately the guy crashed and perished. And so it put them back a step or two, I think, too. But the helicopter thing, I mean, these guys are coming with thousands of hours of flying in combat with IR, and the systems have gotten way better. And so I think it's something to be used. You know, it's all risk reward, right? We do that on the on the macro side, or the micro side on the structure fire. What's the risk of going and searching this house when we know everybody's out or it's to the ground? Is it survivable, right? We're doing it there. We do it on the largest scale too. And so is there benefit in flying at night in an evacuated neighborhood to get the fire tamped down? I think there is. And the pilots are willing to take it. They're willing to make that risk. But, you know, I'm sure there's going to be a tragedy at some point, and they'll question it. But the benefit has been outweighing it, I think. You know, we'll see.
Yeah. It definitely adds a lot of new opportunities to the situation. And I'll be honest, you know, the nighttime weather dynamics definitely give you an upper hand. Now, when you can get an overhand knock on the fire using the tactics you got, that's going to give you better outcomes.
But we always say, you know, like if your plan counts on aviation, that's not a good plan because it can always be shut down. And we see it a lot. Like I've seen that in Oregon where we can't fly for a week. So it's all ground pounding, you know, so it is, it's an awesome tool when it's usable.
Yeah.
And like I said, on that Burrell fire, we had a couple calm nights. They were able to really get some of the hotter sections of a particular area down. And it saved one of the towns because of it partially. So, yeah, you know, it's all risk reward, right? People are going to risk a lot to save a lot, risk a little to save a little. And that, you know, those words are still true.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I've talked mostly. Are there other questions or stuff we want to cover? Or
I think that nails all my questions.
No, I was just adding my 2 cents.
Yeah.
Well, Eric, I appreciate you coming out and joining us for the day.
Thanks. I just would say to people that are starting this career to be open-minded to change. And, you know, my grandmother used to say, and we're all guilty of this, you have 2 ears and 1 mouth, respect the ratio. You know, like there's a time to ask questions and there's a time to get to it and not question your leadership and trust them. But overall, like I really encourage people to pursue this. It's a very gratifying, whether you're getting paid or not, or, I mean, it just feels really good to be on that front line of serving a community. You know, I'd love to be a billionaire and give people money. That'd be fun to try. But I feel a lot more direct in my community this way. And so get up, put your phone down and go down to your fire department and see what they need.
You opposed to coming back in 6 months after we see what the fire season has in store for
No.
us?
Yeah, we'll see what happens.
Recap?
Yeah, a little recap and probably some new stories to add to the pile. I mean, there's lots of them. It's funny when you ask me about like the coolest places that now the list is just like ticking off all these different places we've seen. So Alaska was pretty outstanding as well. I encourage people to get up there, whether it's recreationally or on fire, on a fire assignment, you know.
It sounds like an amazing opportunity.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a little different. I mean, most of our firefighters in the country really are at structure departments, volunteer departments. They don't get to do that traveling thing, which is unique to wildland.
Do the Alaskan crews have a rifle in their gear?
Yeah, the crews that are out on you have on the red cards in Alaska. Red card is your qualifications card in this country. I forget what the Alaska Department of Natural Resources, I think they call it a red card still. It has rifleman as a position, so you're trained on a long rifle, and it is part of the package that goes out with you. Yeah, it's essential, and they'll use it for hunting too.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
Fresh
and
meat.
to like protect you from grizzly bears.
Yeah, you have alpha predators out there besides yourselves, and but you also I know crews that will both fish and they'll grab an elk when they're out there because MREs are fine. They do this thing called tundra fridges, where they peel the tundra back and they get these boxes. There's 2 different boxes of food. One has a bunch of meals. There's like steak. They're just 2 different variations, and they can feed, I think it's 4 people for 3 days each. And they just bury them and then put the flap over it, and it stays cool. And so they eat pretty decently, but they do supplement out there. I've heard lots of stories of people fishing and eating fish out of the river.
I can't blame them.
Yeah, no. The Russian crews are famous for it. Like their kitchen crew, they have a position, and sometimes they do on the American crews up there too, where there's a camp guy. And he's got the rifle, but the Russians, they get a dress kit, rifle, like they have everything they need to go out and get meat.
Wow.
Yeah.
Never thought about that.
Yeah, a little different. Yeah, it's a little different than going into the day room and in the kitchen in the station and making a meal with everybody.
Or going to the reefer and grabbing a pre-pep meal that you're going to eat later.
Yeah, structured people definitely eat better than the wildland guys, for sure.
Well,
But-
sweet.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for coming on the show again.
I
We'll
appreciate it.
have you back very soon.
Yeah.
Cool. Let us know. Reach out if there's anything Netherland Fire can do. Come reach out to us. We have a pretty robust public outreach. So,
Well, thank you.
yeah.
All right. Till
Nice.
next